The process of change, what I've discovered, requires unlearning. That's the hard part about change, is unlearning, and then it's relearning. It's literally breaking habits that we have within ourselves, and then after we break those habits of thought, of behavior, and emotion, is to reinvent a new self. It's pruning synaptic connections and sprouting new connections. It's unfiring and unwiring, and refiring and rewiring. It's losing your mind, really, and creating a new one. It's deprogramming and reprogramming. It's unmemorizing emotions that are stored in the body and then reconditioning the body to a new mind and to a new emotion. And so everybody has a story about the past or their past. And we tell those stories based on the emotions we experience from the past. And the stronger the emotion that we feel from some incident, some experience in our life, the more altered we are inside of us, the more we pay attention to what's causing it. And that moment becomes a moment frozen in time. And the brain takes a series of snapshots, and that's called a memory. So then we think neurologically within the circuits of our own personal subjective experience of that reality based on the feeling that we get from the experience. I think the problem is that most people don't know that when they think about the event, they're producing the same changes chemically in their brain and body as if the event was occurring. So you review the event 50 to 100 times in one day, and it takes the thought and the feeling, the images and the emotions, the stimulus and response that starts the conditioning process of the body actually living in the past. Now the challenge is the firing and wiring of that memory may not be the truth, but it's the truth for you. And the emotions then become the boundary of what feels familiar and what feels known. And so the person can actually live a healthy life and go on with her life a whole way in spite of the trauma. The challenge is by living by that same emotion, it becomes so familiar to us that guilt or shame or unworthiness or fear just becomes how we normally feel. And so those feelings tend to drive our thoughts, right? And if you can't think greater than how you feel, and feelings and emotions are the record of the past, then for the most part, you're thinking in the past. And if how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, well, your entire state of being is in the past. Now, the challenge is that the body is so objective. It doesn't know the difference between the event that created the trauma 15, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, and the chemistry, the emotion that you're creating by thought alone. The body's believing it's living in the same past experience. So then the person is actually viewing or perceiving reality through the lens of the past. And so anything that triggers anything that they can associate that's relatively familiar, then the big thing is get ready, because you don't want that to happen again in your future. So the brain is always forecasting the worst case scenario based on the memory of the past. And now the brain is actually coming up with that worst case scenario, because if you prepare for the worst, there's better chances of surviving whatever that trauma is going to be again. So the challenge is that we start out of the infinite potentials in the quantum field. We're selecting really one of the worst outcomes we could possibly imagine, embellishing that outcome, and then emotionally embracing that future before it happens in the anticipation of the event. And now we're taking that thought and the feeling, the image and the emotion, the stimulus and response, and we're conditioning the body and the brain into looking like that future event has already occurred. And the stronger the emotion we feel from whatever we're imagining, the more we pay attention to what we're imagining. And we're embossing that circuitry further in the brain, and we're emotionally conditioning the body more into that emotional state. So if the familiar past in the conditioning process is the known, and the predictable or anticipated future is the known, there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that's the sweet spot of that present moment. Now, the person can live a normal life feeling those emotions and being successful and having relationships and all that stuff until it comes time where they get a diagnosis, or it comes time where they go bankrupt, or there comes time where they are ending a relationship, or something goes wrong where they want to create a new career or a new life, and now all of a sudden they come right up against their past. Why? Because that's what's been defining them all along. And all I'm asking them to do is stop telling the story of your past and start telling the story of your future. Stop believing in your past, real or imagined, and start believing in your future. Stop romancing the past, and let's start romancing a future.